Resistance Report for June 13th, 2017, and the theme tonight is American democracy and the enforcement of the law. Jeff Sessions testified today before the Senate Intelligence Committee, and no surprise, he stonewalled. He didn't really answer any question. Now, Jeff Sessions, remember, perjured himself before the Senate. I have no idea why they would invite him back, why Democratic senators wouldn't make a huge fuss about having somebody testify before them who had perjured himself before on the same material, the same issue that he was being asked questions about today, which was obviously the relationship between the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, and Russian operatives. But there was one thing that came out very loudly and clearly today from Jeff Sessions' testimony, and that is his absolute lack of concern and Trump's lack of concern about what we know from the intelligence agencies to be Russia's meddling, interference, attack on our democracy in the elections of 2016. Sessions told West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin that he did not recall, quote, "I did not recall any meeting in which Donald Trump expressed concern or even any curiosity about what Russia had been doing during the 2016 election." Now remember, this is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States who supervises the FBI, or at least at that time supervised the FBI until he recused himself, but he did not recall even a single conversation with Donald Trump, ever, even before the Trump administration was formed, in which Trump expressed any curiosity about Russia. Sessions also said that he himself, as the country's and Trump's lead law enforcement official, was never briefed on Russia's intervention. Was never briefed? Now again, this is a person who was in line to become the head of the entire Justice Department, responsibility for the FBI, and he was never even briefed on what Russia did, what the intelligence communities knew Russia had done. Sessions stated that Russia's role was the conclusion of the intelligence community, but Sessions didn't say it was his conclusion. In fact, he was very careful not to say that it was his conclusion. He separated himself from the intelligence community in that respect. Last week, in fact, it reminds me that when Manchin, that is, Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, asked former FBI Director James Comey whether Trump had ever expressed curiosity. Same question. Trump, did he ever express curiosity to you about Russia's attempts to swing the election? Comey said that he didn't remember any conversations with the president about the Russian intrusion into the election. So here we have Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, Comey, James Comey, who was until very recently the head of the FBI, and neither of them recalls any conversation in which Donald Trump expresses any interest or any curiosity about Russia's intervention in the 2016 election. In fact, in January, you may remember, Donald Trump called the whole Russian thing, that was his expression, quote unquote, a ruse. In April, when asked whether he thought Russia tried to meddle, Trump first said, and this was in a public interview, he first said, "I don't know." And then later in the interview, he said he was okay. He was, quote, okay with the intelligence agency's determination that Russia did attempt to meddle in the campaign. Later that month, later in April, he suggested Ukraine was pushing the allegations that Russia was behind the hacking. Now remember, he had already been briefed by the FBI, the NSA, the CIA. Donald Trump knew that that was the conclusion of the intelligence agencies, and yet in April he's saying that no, it's Ukraine that is actually pushing this story. And then at the end of May, on May 30th, what did Trump tweet? Russian officials must be laughing at the U.S. and how a lame excuse for why the Democrats lost the election has taken over the fake news. Now, the White House itself is a leaky bucket, and Donald Trump has, when he was talking to the Russians, when he was talking to Russian officials right there in the Oval Office, he leaked sensitive, classified material. And yet the only people he seems to be concerned about leaking are people who are leaking intelligence reports having to do with Russia's intervention in the election. Something we really need to know more about, which is connected to another story today. Again, the purpose of the Resistance Report is to give you these connections, to show you the pattern. Today we learn that Russia's cyber attack on the U.S. electoral system in 2016 was far more widespread than has been publicly revealed, including incursions into voter databases and software systems in almost twice as many states as previously reported. Now, this is a big deal. Details of the wave of attacks in the summer and fall of 2016 were provided to Bloomberg News. Bloomberg News is not a lefty outlet, by three people with direct knowledge of the U.S. investigations into the matter. Here were the specifics that came out today. Now, Jeff Sessions' testimony was the big magnet. It sucked all of the oxygen out of the news today, but this is really important. Specifics today. One, Russian hackers hit systems, voting systems, in a total of 39 states, potentially adding or deleting names to voter rolls. 39 states. The hackers accessed software designed to be used by poll workers on Election Day, and in at least one state accessed a campaign finance database. In Illinois, for example, investigators found evidence that cyber intruders from Russia tried to delete or alter voter data. In early July 2016, hackers had gained access to Illinois' state voter database, which contained information such as names, dates of birth, genders, driver's licenses, and partial social security numbers for 15 million people, half of whom were active voters. As many as 90,000 records were ultimately compromised. Now this, my friends, is very, very big news. Using evidence from the Illinois computer banks, federal agents were able to develop digital signatures, among them Internet Protocol addresses used by the hackers to spot where the hackers went next around the country. The signatures were sent through Homeland Security to every state. 37 states reported finding traces of the Russian hackers in their various voting systems. In two other states, California and Florida, those traces were found in systems run by a private contractor managing critical election systems. Can I emphasize with you once again, this is a huge deal. Russia has invaded American democracy. Now, some people, when I write about this or talk about this, they get back to me and they say, you have a Cold War mentality. You're going back to the Cold War. Why do you want to revive the Cold War? My point is, there is nothing more precious than our democracy, than voting, than the right to vote. That is at the center of our entire constitutional system. Russia has attacked that system. Donald Trump, as commander-in-chief, has a huge responsibility to protect us, not to deny it, not to minimize it, not to have his attorney general and his former FBI agent say he's not curious. No, he needs to be curious. This is a huge issue. So if Jeffrey Sessions, or Jeff Sessions, is not Jeffrey, it's Jeff Sessions, is ignoring the Russian attack on our democracy, what is he doing? What is he spending his time on? He's spending his time basically saying we have to have a war on even minor drug offenses in the United States. Even minor drug offenses. Nonviolent, minor drug offenses. Today, here's another piece of today. Again, what we're trying to do with the Resistance Report is show you how things fit together. So today it was revealed that Jeff Sessions wants to prosecute medical marijuana. He's asked Congress to undo a federal law from 2014 that allows states to legalize medical marijuana, gives states the right to get waivers from federal law and legalize medical marijuana. Sessions argues, and this is in a letter that was made public today that went to congressional leaders, he argues he needs to be able to go after medical marijuana because the United States is, in his words, quote, in the midst of an historic drug epidemic and potentially long-term uptick in violent crime. That's what he said. Now this is complete and utter rubbish. The historic drug epidemic that he's talking about involves deadly opiate drugs, not marijuana. There is a serious problem, a huge and growing problem, a national crisis with regard to opiate drugs and the misuse of them. But what does it have to do with medical marijuana? In fact, this is interesting. A growing body of research acknowledged by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, has shown that opiate overdoses, opiate deaths, actually decrease in states with medical marijuana laws on the books. Can I just repeat that? Completely contrary to what Jeff Sessions says, opiate deaths and overdoses decrease in states that have medical marijuana laws on the books that allow the use and sale of medical marijuana. So cracking down on medical marijuana, as Sessions wants to do, is not going to reduce the opiate epidemic. In fact, it could make the opiate epidemic far worse. Jeff Sessions, can we just say this? I mean, I don't want to. I am somebody who cares about this country very deeply. I don't like to in any way talk about public servants in the way that I'm about to talk about Jeff Sessions. But honestly, I've seen a lot of attorneys general. I've seen some terrible attorneys general in my time. Jeff Sessions is just about the worst, the most ignorant, the most hidebound, and by the way, not to minimize it, he's also the most racist attorney general in modern history. What is he doing there? This is an important job. Hello? Okay, your questions. Sue Riccardelli. I'm very concerned that the White House is showing little or no concern that Russia could and would interfere in our elections. I am concerned too, Sue. If they didn't collude, why would they be acting this way? Well, Sue, the point that we have to keep in mind is that every intelligence agency, okay, can I just repeat this? The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, they have all concluded, without any question of doubt, that Russia did intrude in our 2016 election. In fact, people who are on the Senate Intelligence Committee, who've actually looked at the reports from the intelligence agencies, they have also concluded that the intrusion by Russia into our election in 2016 affected the outcome of that election. That's what Dianne Feinstein said, for example. So my point is that there is no longer any question about that. What's really the question is, what are they going to do in the future? What happens to the 2018 election? What happens to the 2020 presidential election? If they already are gaining ground in terms of understanding how to actually affect our election machinery, this is a huge, huge problem. Why isn't the Trump administration making this the number one priority in terms of enforcing the law and protecting our democracy, instead of playing it down, showing no curiosity, going after people who leak intelligence documents about this, trying to change the subject? Chad Braswell, do you think term limits would help with the economic discrepancies? Chad, look, here's what we know about term limits. Where they've been tried in states, what happens is basically you increase the power of the staffs who are there permanently and have an institutional memory. So I'm all in favor of getting big money out of politics, of reducing the impact of big money and big lobbying and Wall Street and big corporations and so on, and getting rid of the revolving door between government and business and the regulator and the regulatees. But term limits are not the way to go. Okay, this is the final question. Greg Dreyfus, don't forget to mention John Ossoff. Good point. It's not too late. He could win this. Election is June 20th. Let me not forget to mention John Ossoff. That election in Georgia, 6th District, Congressional District in Georgia, critically important. June 20th, when I last looked, he was leading. This is also a hugely important election in terms of signaling what is going to happen in 2018. And that's why Republicans are pouring huge amounts of business money. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, all of the big business groups are pouring a lot of money into this race. The Koch brothers are pouring a lot of money into this race. All of the Koch brothers network is pouring a lot of money into this race. But you know what? We have citizens, particularly the citizens of that district in Georgia. We have our voice. We have our ability to actually vote. Our voice and our vote. Big business, big money, they can only invest. They can't actually vote. They don't have a direct voice. That's why this election is so important, and that's why, Greg, I'm very pleased you reminded me. That's the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I want to thank again our producer, Yael Bridge, our associate producer, Sasha Lightman. Both of them have been doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes, behind the camera. And thank you also for your continued diligence, your continued fight on behalf of our democracy. And let me just say this. The continuing theme of the Resistance Report is protection of our democracy. This is not a Democratic, capital D, or Republican, capital R issue. This is not a partisan issue. It should not be a partisan issue. The Resistance Report, for example, is not a partisan report. Republicans ought to be as concerned about our democracy as anybody else, and have been in the past. We've got to unite and avoid the possibility of tyranny. Thanks